I'm Lauren. I was never the one they expected to stand out, especially not today. As I stood at the back of the church, the air thick with lilies and low murmurs, all I could think about was how predictable this moment had become. My father had always preferred tradition structure and people who played their part without question. So of course Harper was at the podium, her voice trembling just enough to seem heartfelt, her hands clutching a neatly folded piece of paper. She soaked in every glance, every nod of sympathy, as if grief were another stage she'd mastered. I wasn't asked to speak. I wasn't even consulted. According to the program neatly printed and stacked at the entrance, Harper was the sole representative of the family. Not our mother, not me, just her. It wasn't a surprise. It was just the latest page in a long story I knew by heart. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I sat 2 rows back in the chair she clearly thought would keep me quiet and small, like background music no one notices. But I wasn't angry, not in the way she might have hoped. There were no tears or trembling hands. My breath was steady. My gaze didn't flinch. While Harper played her part, I studied the room like a map, tracking expressions, noting where attention drifted and where it landed. She wanted the audience. She could have it. I only needed 1 second. 1 moment. 1 word. I've been told my whole life that I was too quiet, too analytical, too detached, that I didn't understand how to work a room like Harper did. But working a room isn't the same as owning it, and today wasn't about her. It never was. When our father died, the world expected Harper to lead. She had the connections, the look, the charm. I had none of that. What I had couldn't be seen on the surface, which made it all the more powerful. I watched her finish her eulogy with a dramatic pause and a trembling lower lip. The crowd responded with soft sniffles and dabs of tissues. It was rehearsed, polished, but I could tell, even from here, that she was scanning the audience for reaction, making sure every moment landed. She locked eyes with me for half a second. There it was, the flicker of smugness, the unspoken message I'd grown so used to. You're not needed here. You're not one of us. Just sit quietly and let the real adults handle this. I tilted my head slightly, offering her a calm, unreadable expression. Not defiant, not afraid. Just there. Present in a way she didn't expect. Because what she didn't know was that the moment she opened her mouth to speak, I had already made my move. My plan had been set days ago. The details are in place. The execution is silent. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about drama or spectacle. It was about presence. Mine. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone to offer me a seat at the table. I had built my own. And while Harper wrapped up her performance in front of an audience that had always seen her as the golden one, I waited. Patient, composed, and fully aware that everything was about to shift. Not loudly, not all at once, but with precision. Because what they didn't know, and what Harper would never believe until it was too late, was that I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to be remembered. And that starts now. Growing up in our house meant living under a spotlight that never turned your way. Harper was always the one in focus. My father used to say she had hustle grit and market instincts. He loved using those words when he talked about her like he was describing a prized investment. I was the quiet one, the reader, the one who stayed up late building things in silence. When I got accepted into a top university on scholarship, he barely looked up from his newspaper. But when Harper landed her first real estate deal, he stood up at dinner and toasted her like she had just won a war. That night is burned into my memory. The table was full. Family, friends, business partners, everyone gathered for one of Dad's big dinners. He raised his glass voice, booming, listing off Harper's commissions and calling her a shark in a sea of minnows. People clapped. I smiled politely. When the noise died down, I said almost as an afterthought that one of my research papers had just been published in a national security journal. My father's eyes flicked toward me. He gave me that half smile he reserved for things he didn't quite understand. "That's nice," he said, patting my arm like I was 6 again. Then he turned right back to Harper, who was basking in the praise, smirking just enough for me to notice. No one else said anything. They moved on like my moment had never happened. That was the pattern. My wins were invisible, abstract, too quiet. Hers were loud, easy to market, built for applause. And in our family, applause was the only currency that mattered. It took me years to stop thinking that maybe, if I tried harder, if I spoke louder, they'd finally hear me. But I was never the golden child. I was the ghost they tolerated, not the daughter they celebrated. And it was in those long, quiet dinners where my name barely registered that I began learning how power really works, not by who gets noticed, but by whom gets underestimated. It happened on a Thursday. I had just found out that Harper had undercut me on a project I'd been quietly building for over a year. A private sector opportunity I wasn't even supposed to be eligible for until someone mysteriously forwarded an internal brief to her firm. I knew it was her. The timing, the phrasing, even the polished spin they used on the press release. It was my language, my strategy, twisted just enough to carry her name instead of mine. I called my mother that night. I wasn't looking for her to fix it. I just wanted her to say something to acknowledge that this wasn't fair, that maybe, for once, she saw what Harper kept doing. She let out a long sigh before I even finished. Not angry, just tired. Like I was asking her to pick a side she never planned to stand on. "Please, Lauren," she said, "just let Harper have this. You know how she is. It's easier for everyone if you don't make a big deal out of it. Easier for everyone." Those words landed harder than any insult, because what she really meant was easier for them. For her. For Harper. And once again, I was being asked to pay the cost of keeping the peace. I don't remember what I said back. Maybe nothing. Maybe just silence. But when I hung up, the quiet wasn't hurt anymore. It was clarity. That was the last time I asked for understanding. The last time I looked at that house and those people was for any kind of recognition. Something inside me closed like a book I had read too many times. After that call, I stopped trying to earn a place at their table. I wasn't part of their story. I was their shadow, and shadows don't get invitations. They get erased. So I started building something else. Not a relationship, a strategy. Not revenge, containment. The next time they looked at me, they wouldn't see a sister. They'd see a variable they couldn't predict, and I would finally be the one holding the pen. There's a room deep inside the Pentagon that doesn't appear on most floor plans. No windows, no distractions. Just walls lined with classified maps, satellite feeds, and data streams blinking in silence. It's where I spend most of my time. In that space, I'm not Lauren, the overlooked daughter. I'm Dr. Lauren Hayes, lead strategist for special contingency analysis, specializing in psychological warfare and field-level predictive modeling. When I speak in that room, 4-star generals lean in. Intelligence officers from across branches take notes. There are no interruptions, no dismissive smiles, no soft pats on the arm to brush me aside. They don't care about my tone or whether I make eye contact the right way. They care that my assessments get soldiers home alive. My mind is my credibility. And in this world, that's currency that doesn't fluctuate. I remember one morning briefing. A SEAL commander sat across from me, arms crossed, face like granite. I laid out a sequence of behavioral triggers for an asset embedded in Eastern Europe. When I finished, he didn't speak. He just nodded once. That nod carried more weight than 1,000 hollow compliments I'd collected over the years at family dinners. Here, I don't have to prove I belong. The work speaks first. Results echo louder than personality. No one asks about my background or whether I'm too young or too female or too quiet. They just ask if the strategy holds. That contrast never stopped being jarring. At home, I'm still the girl who writes reports. At work, I brief the people who give the final go on missions that can shift national posture. The same name, 2 lives, one dismissed, one deeply trusted. Even Jake, my husband, who leads one of the Tier 1 teams, never looks at me like I'm fragile. When we're in mission planning mode, rank disappears. He listens to me like he would any commander who could get his people out in one piece. That kind of respect rewires your sense of self. It becomes armor, Not arrogance, but something steadier, something earned. In that world, I learned something my family never understood. Power doesn't always speak the loudest. Sometimes it doesn't speak at all. It just calculates weights and moves with precision. So when my father died and Harper tried once again to write the narrative, I didn't panic. I just returned to the tools I knew best. Strategy. Quiet leverage. Controlled timing. Because I might not have mattered in the house where I was raised. But in the rooms where decisions are made, I was never invisible. The night after my father died, I didn't cry. I didn't scroll through photos or reread old birthday cards. I sat at my kitchen counter with the lights low laptop open and a floor plan of the funeral home glowing on the screen. Jake answered on the first ring. He didn't need me to explain. When I said Protocol Haven, he understood it wasn't about grief. It was about containment. No questions. No hesitation. He switched into operation mode the same way I had. I laid out the perimeter choke points and seating layout. My voice stayed even stripped of emotion. There wasn't room for doubt in this kind of planning. 12 men. Dispersed. Suits not uniforms. Blended into the crowd with no pattern to their placement. I assigned each one a visual cue and a positioning marker. I wasn't creating a threat. I was establishing a psychological deterrent. Their role wasn't to act. It was to be seen at the exact moment I chose. Silent, coordinated presence. A force Harper couldn't name, predict, or manipulate. The kind of thing she never trained for. I didn't brief Jake as my husband. I gave him the same operational clarity I would give a commander, and he responded like one. A single phrase, "The team is yours." That was all I needed. After the call, I moved through the plan again, double-checking variables. Entry points, sightlines, placement relative to emotional triggers. I reviewed it like a tactical grid, not a family event. Harper thought this would be her stage. One more chance to outshine, to bait me, to document my failure in front of people who'd always sided with her. But I wasn't bringing tears. I was bringing leverage. This wasn't revenge. It was realignment. She'd rewritten the story for years, always painting herself as the strong one, the capable one, the heir. But that narrative only held as long as no one questioned it. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to speak at all. I just had to shift the weight of the room. And once the moment came, I would do it with a single word. A trigger I'd programmed in silence. Because that's how real power moves. Not in noise, but in timing. Not in reaction, but in control. And when that control is absolute, you don't have to prove anything. You just let the silence speak for you. The air inside the chapel felt tight, like it had been squeezed by invisible hands. The smell of roses and regret clung to the pews, layered over forced whispers and polished shoes. Harper moved through the crowd like she owned it, pausing just long enough for people to notice her grief. She had planned this moment down to the fabric of her dress. Her posture was perfect, her timing rehearsed. What she hadn't planned for was me. I saw it the second it happened. A flicker of movement in her purse. The phone was angled just enough to catch my profile. She wasn't recording the service. She was recording me. A calculated trap. If I blinked too fast, frowned too long, I flinched. When someone spoke to me, it would all be edited into a story she could control. She wanted proof that I didn't belong here, that I was unstable, cold, broken. My fingers closed around my phone screen, already awake. No panic, no hesitation. A message from Jake waited. Don't react. She's filming. It was the trigger. I didn't need more. My thumb hovered for half a second. Then I typed it. Haven. The word disappeared into the ether with a single tap. I tucked the phone away and lifted my chin just slightly. My eyes scanned the room slowly like nothing had changed, but everything had. The first to move was Jake. One row ahead, he stood without a word. His posture was straight, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. A moment later, a man in the far left corner rose, then another by the aisle, then two more at the back. One by one, all 12 stood in perfect sync, silent, still, unshakable. It took the room 5 seconds to catch up. The noise stopped. The officiant's voice trailed off. People turned in confusion, unsure whether they were witnessing a tribute or a breach. But there were no words, no movements, just presence. A silent, coordinated wall of precision and control. It didn't look like a protest or a ceremony. It looked like a warning. Eyes began shifting, heads craned. Then the ripple hit Harper. She turned phone still in her hand and froze. Her expression cracked in stages. First confusion, then suspicion, then a slow creeping horror. She realized what she was seeing, but not how, not why. These weren't security guards. They weren't mourners. They were something else. And they all answered me. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just watched her unravel. Her grip on the phone slipped. It hit the marble floor with a clean, sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. No one bent to pick it up. She turned to our mother, searching for support. But our mother wasn't looking at her. She was staring at me. Not with disappointment, not with fear, with realization. Like she was seeing me for the very first time. The room had shifted. The orbit realigned. And I was now the center. Jake took 2 measured steps and positioned himself at my side. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. We are here with her. No one moved. No one whispered. The silence was absolute. And in that silence, the narrative Harper had spent a lifetime building fell apart. Not with shouting, not with drama, just with clarity. I had never needed their approval. I had needed this moment, not to show them who I was, but to remind myself. I was done apologizing for not fitting their mold, for not playing small, for not sitting quietly while they told my story for me. One word changed the room, not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. It meant I had stopped asking and started commanding. Harper didn't speak as she backed away from the center of the room. Her face was pale, lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the one holding the narrative. Our mother remained frozen in her seat. Her eyes never left mine. There was no anger there, just the slow, dawning realization of how much she had missed. Around us, whispers spread like static. People shifted in their seats, glancing from Harper to me, then to the silent wall of men still standing watch. The silence had changed them too. One by one, old colleagues of my father began approaching. Men who had shaken Harper's hand an hour ago with ease now passed her without a glance. They came to me. One held out his hand with the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. A retired general, sharp-eyed, no patience for theatrics. He didn't offer pleasantries. He said my name and then paused. His voice dropped just enough to land heavy. Your father. He never told us. But if he'd known what you are, he would have been proud. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Because I knew that wasn't entirely true. My father measured success in what he could show off. My work would never have made sense to him. But it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the people who once looked through me now saw me clearly, not as a shadow or a footnote, but as the one who had always been there, watching, calculating, leading. I didn't need applause, just acknowledgement. And in that moment, it came without noise, without performance. It came with presence. The weight I had carried for years, the need to prove, to justify, to explain, finally cracked and lifted. I had nothing left to prove. Not to them. Not to myself. 6 months later, the room was nothing like a chapel. Fluorescent lights hummed above a polished wood table. Seated around me were generals, advisors, and senior directors, all waiting for my final call on a multi-agency threat response. I spoke with the same measured voice I always had. Calm, focused, the language of decision makers. There were no raised eyebrows, no second guesses, only nods and clipped affirmations. When the meeting ended, I gathered my tablet and walked out into the corridor. The moment I stepped into the hall, my phone buzzed. A name I hadn't seen since the funeral lit up the screen. Harper. The message was short. An apology. A request to talk. I stared at the words for a second, waiting for something to stir anger closure. Even curiosity, but nothing came. It felt like reading a memory I had already archived. Something that belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. I tapped the screen. Archived. Done. Jake was waiting just ahead. No words were exchanged. He just looked at me and understood the way he always did. We walked in step, our pace steady, no need to fill the silence. That was the thing about being with someone who knew your worth before anyone else did. You didn't have to perform. You just had to walk forward. I used to think family meant the people who shared your blood, the ones you were born tethered to. But that was before I learned what real loyalty looks like. Real family shows up when it matters. They stand without question. They move when you say move. They hold the line, not because they have to, but because they choose to. And sometimes they don't come from your past. They come from the life you built, the one you fought for when no one else saw you. This was mine, and I was finally home,